So, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is by far my favorite game that I've played this year. It might be my favorite game ever. And with the Game Awards coming up, I don't think it's going to get the recognition that it necessarily deserves, but that's okay, because if you've played it, you know how high a quality that this game is. Over the last year or so, I've put out a bunch of videos where I cover the game, give reviews on the main story and the DLCs. I figured, being near the Thanksgiving holiday, maybe just watch something longer to throw on in the background, that I'd edit them all together into one cohesive video. So that's what this is. My Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 full review after 175 hours, which I feel like is a lot. It's definitely a lot for me, but some people have put like upwards of 300 to 500 hours into this game, which is just insane that you can get that much out of this game. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this, and let me know your thoughts about Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 in the comments. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 changed my life, at least insofar as how I view video games. I always say that for the longest time, I was the type of gamer to favor sports and multiplayer titles, the types of games associated with the more casual side of gamers. Perhaps you could even label me as a bro gamer. There are the occasional games that piqued my interest, Bioshock and its sequels being a huge example, the Last of Us franchise more recently, but for the most part, if I were to play a single player game, it would have to have been rather straightforward. So when the original Kingdom Come Deliverance came out, I was interested, but I just couldn't imagine playing a single player game for hundreds of hours. Unless it was Madden, I guess. On top of that, every review I read emphasized that the combat was extremely difficult to master. Another barrier to entry, so I let it go. Then this year, I saw advertisements for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and I just knew that I had to try it. You see, I love the Song of Ice and Fire books, better known for their adaptation of Game of Thrones. As you may know, there hasn't been a new book in a while, but there are supplemental books such as The Tales of Dunk and Egg, three novellas that tell the story of a hedge knight and an incognito Targaryen prince traveling the country and lending their aid wherever it's needed. I've read these stories dozens of times, and then came KCD2, seemingly allowing me to live out my medieval dreams of being a knight. So I bought the title without having played the original, and after my first play session, I was hooked. From then on, if I was firing up my PlayStation, it was to visit Henry and Bohemia. I even made a video when the game first released, singing its praises and imploring others to give it a shot. I was probably about 25, 30 hours into the game at that point, and I stand by my assessment. This is a special kind of game, one that comes around only a few times a decade. The thesis of this entire video will be the same. It is worth your time and money, and you won't regret buying it. And perhaps most importantly, the sword fighting isn't as hard as people make it out to be. It is difficult, but in a rewarding way. In fact, that's a great place to start this review. Combat in KCD2 can be punishing, but in the same way that a hard workout is. You hate it when you first start it, you can't hardly do anything, and you try to avoid it wherever you can. However, if you stick with it, continue to train, then before long, you'll be crushing workouts you never imagined possible. Or in the case of the game, fighting multiple enemies at once, when in the past, being outnumbered 2-1 was almost certainly going to lead to a game over screen. What KCD2 does that's different from many other games that I've seen is allow players to grow to being mighty within the first area, from a man with nothing but the meager clothes on his back to a scrappy warrior who maybe doesn't possess the finest armor, but has seen so much combat at that point that he can make do with what he has. The castle, and by proxy your main mission, hangs over you wherever you go in the Trotsky region. Reminder of what you're working towards, and that there's a main story that needs to be addressed. Once you've had your fill of all the side quests. When you're strong enough and have secured a way into the castle, it feels like a climax. Your hard work is paying off. You're rescuing Hans, you're delivering the message that you were sent out to deliver at the beginning of the game. At that point, I'd played about 50 hours, and I was sure that I was nearing the end. And I couldn't have been more wrong. Getting into the castle is the end of the first map, that first area that you feel like you've played an entire game. You've built up from nothing to something. You get drawn into a conflict where alliances are unclear, as is what the right thing to do. If you're like me, you become involved in a massacre that haunts Henry and you alike. You question if you did the right thing, if the entire situation could have been avoided, but you can't go back. You're in the thick of the narrative now. getting kidnapped by people who attacked you at the beginning of the game before finding out that you're actually all fighting for the same side, in opposition of the man you were attempting to get into an alliance, the man who you fought alongside and killed for. Politics is a messy game, as is war. Before you know it, you're defending Holdfast, fighting off opposing armies. Eventually, you enter the Kuttenberg region, which features a huge city that feels as alive as any that I've seen in a game. The second map is nearly the size of the first, equally filled with side content. You think that you are like hot shit coming into Kuttenberg, and then it's just an entirely new ball game. The enemies are more difficult, their armor better. It's essentially like you're playing a sequel within the same game. Everything is bigger. Not just the cities, but the stakes and the missions. If you're like me, then you spent a further 60 hours collecting characters to aid you in your fight against King Sigismund. The choices are interesting and impactful. Henry is a man set on a path of vengeance due to his village being burned down and his parents killed along with many of his friends. Innocent people murdered to advance the claim of a king from a faraway land. His cause is just, or as just as any revenge mission can be. But if you're not careful, you can lose yourself, and Henry by proxy, repeating actions that you've been on the other side of, convincing yourself that this evil is necessary for the larger picture, becoming what you swore to fight against. As there's a heavy overtone of Christianity, this comes with the added layer of Henry not only damaging his reputation with those on earth, but perhaps damning his soul for eternity. Despite wanting to play the game as righteously as possible, there are decisions that I made that I wish I could take back, things I wouldn't have done had I known the outcome. But I believe that speaks to the effectiveness of the storytelling by the writers at Warhorse Studios. There's no clear right or wrong in wars between men. No one is a saint on the battlefield, and if you try to be one in this world, you'll likely end up dead long before being anointed. Alright, let's move on to the DLCs now. My Kingdom Come Deliverance playthrough took about 110 hours to get to the end of the main story. When it was done, I didn't want to leave the world that Warhorse had created, and fortunately for me, I didn't have to quite yet, as Warhorse had committed to releasing some story DLCs, the first of which was Brushes with Death. In addition, that will take you about 8 hours if you're taking your time, and brings you back to the Trotsky region before finishing in Kuttenberg. Returning to the Trotsky region is really interesting. It's a place where I spent so much time, struggling with even the least threatening bandits, working on ways to get into the wedding, and of course, just learning how the game works in general. Now, when returning, you feel like your version of Henry is not just a lowly man-at-arms, but a genuine knight, ready to right the wrongs that were done to him when you first started the game out. By that I mean I may have gone back to that spot where you get ambushed at the beginning and bandits usually set up camp. You see, when I first started, this place was terrifying. Not just because you watched all of Henry's friends get massacred here, but also because if you so much as looked at the camp wrong, 5 or so bandits were on you and you were probably going to die. Now, in full plate armor, these bandits are little more than people temporarily holding whatever items you're about to loot off their dead bodies. I know this is morbid, but I needed this. I needed to work through that early game trauma. The story of the first DLC itself revolves around an extremely enigmatic artist who you first meet as he's tied to a tree in the forest beneath Trotsky Castle, while talking to a painted skull. The artist's name is Vojta, and he's found himself in this predicament by way of gambling. Once you free him, he tasks you with retrieving items that were stolen from him, though you find out later that these were most likely legitimately gambled away. As the DLC progresses, you learn more about him and his backstory, as he sends you out to collect supplies in order for him to finish a painting he's working on for the church. Along the way, you'll learn more about him and perhaps more pressingly, the skull that he carries around. I don't want to spoil it, but the backstory around the skull was very compelling, as was the resolution. It's a reminder that even in games like KCD2, where you can get lost in the sweeping landscapes and pulse-pounding action, the most compelling moments are the character moments, something that Warhorse has shown that they are extremely capable of delivering on. One of my favorite quests was the one that focused on family drama and the complex dynamics, not just within that family, but the Romani people faced with interacting with the people of the Trotsky region. Much like that quest, the information unfolds in a way that keeps you pushing forward, eager to discover what happened to cause Vojta carry around a painted skull and to talk to it, and helping him move past the trauma you help him finally finish the most important piece of art work of his life. Overall, the DLC was okay. Nothing game-changing, but a nice little addition to the story with the added bonus of getting to have custom shields, which is of course very exciting if your playstyle sees you using them. Personally, I prefer the longsword, so it was a bit lost on me, but that's okay. This past week, they released their second major DLC, Legacy of the Forge. An addition that will allow you to play 15 to 20 more hours depending on what you want out of the game. For me, this was about as perfect of a DLC as could be released. With the main story and many side quests completed, I didn't really have much left to do with Henry. I could travel the region hoping for random encounters, but I had to admit that it was time to put down my sword until Legacy of the Forge. This edition solves a bit of an endgame problem. Once you get to the end of the story, you basically have enough money or access to gear to trade in for money that you can purchase whatever you like. Starting off with a flashback of Henry visiting Kuttenberg with Martin and remembering that he once visited the forge that Martin worked in when he was young, you quickly enter an arrangement with the current owner, a widow, who knew your father back in the day and who offers you part ownership of the forge in return for you allowing her to stay. It's a fair trade, as she'll sell weapons and armor you forge for you while you're off doing the rest of the quests. The heart of the DLC lies in the broken clock of Kuttenberg. Find out that your father had attempted to fix it back in the day, but was unsuccessful, due to issues mainly outside of his control. You decide to pick up the torch and fix it in his memory. Along the way, you'll get commissions from citizens of Kuttenberg to create weapons for them, which will increase your forge's prestige and coin. You can use your earnings to upgrade your forge, customizing it to your liking, which will increase your prestige and bring in more customers as well as enhance your reputation. Along the way, you'll meet people who knew your father and accept apprentices who specialize in certain crucial areas to fixing the clock. It all works together really well, and I very much enjoyed my time getting better at forging weapons and feeling like I was working toward an end goal. Not just the clock, but making my forge the best it could be. There are also a few side quests to get into that will keep you busy. After completing the main quest, overall, I thought this was a wonderful endgame addition. I also think that it will be even better on a replay, being able to tackle the quests at your leisure and providing you with a true home base that feels like your own and isn't just a random room you're renting at an inn. Also, it's very funny to play this after you beat the game because in-game, Henry's been in Kuttenberg for weeks, and he finally notices the forge and remembers he's seen it before. I think that will be incorporated much smoother when it's all accessible on one playthrough. So to conclude, Brushes with Death was fine, but not game-changing. The Legacy of the Forge was amazing and well worth your time and money. Combined, I think that a future complete edition, probably discounted to regular price around the holidays or whenever the third DLC comes out, will be a great deal. Right now, you can get all 3 DLCs and a season pass for $29.99, though I did see the season pass on sale for $22.99 this week. Or if you're only interested in Legacy of the Forge, it's currently $13.99. Well worth the price, in my opinion. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 story is over. The final DLC entitled Mysteria Ecclesia, or Mysteries of the Church, was released, and with that, Book 2 of Henry's story comes to an end. We don't know if we'll ever get a direct sequel, and even if we do get a Kingdom Come Deliverance 3, it might not be a continuation of Henry's story. So his adventure trying to discover the cause of a mysterious illness at a monastery might be the last piece of story we ever get. So, does the DLC send Henry off into the sunset triumphantly, or is it another somewhat boring DLC? It's well known that Brushes with Death and the Legacy of the Forge left fans wanting more. They certainly got it with this final DLC, as it takes anywhere from 10 to 12 hours to complete, depending on your playstyle. But is it any good? Personally, I think so. I mean, I'm a huge sucker for these games and their stories, but I personally think it was well worth the time that I put in. Granted, I have the season pass, so I got it through that rather than spending $14 on it. The story sees Henry accompanying Albic, the personal physician of King Wenceslaw, to the Sedgwick Monastery to act as a kind of personal bodyguard appointed by Peter of Pissick. The reason for this visit is that Albic wants to get to the king, who's being held captive in Vienna. In order to do that, he needs the abbot of the monastery to mediate the situation. Peter's nervous that the entire situation could go sideways, so he asks Henry to come along and keep him safe. Quickly, you discover that the inhabitants of the monastery have been afflicted with a mysterious illness. Henry must help Albic discover what's causing it and treat the sick. and that way it's very much like the other mysteries sprinkled in throughout the story, as Henry has to put on his detective helm and race against time. Now, I'm going to spoil the DLC, so if you haven't played it yet, please click off this video and come back when you've completed it. Along the way, you uncover a conspiracy surrounding a famous knight who traveled to the Holy Land and eventually was buried at the monastery with a piece of the cross that Jesus Christ was killed on. The outbreak occurred because workers who were renovating the monastery chapel were employed by Albic's former friend and underling Zachariah. Zachariah felt like he was often looked over by others in favor of Albic and wants the piece of the cross in order to curry favor with the king, and then he poisons Albic and leverages that to get his hands on the medical records of King Wensico to see if he can use them to cure King Sigismund of his infertility, as both kings suffer from it. Henry has to try to find the records, which were hidden by Albic. Once you do, you can try to forge them to pass off the fakes to Zacharias. If you do and succeed, or you just give the actual records, then you get the antidote and Albic recovers and helps cure the sick. But if you don't, then he loses his eyesight and the sick die. So 2 pretty different ways for the DLC to end. Unfortunately for me, my forged documents weren't quite good enough, and Zachariah saw right through them, resulting in him throwing the antidote to the ground, and then he and Henry faced off in a duel in the rain. It was pretty epic, very cool way to end the DLC. Obviously, Henry kills him, but that doesn't help the sick. It's a sad ending, but I really enjoy that the game allows you to basically fail there. Really helps the experience feel like there's real weight to your actions. Overall, I thought that the mystery was interesting and fun to unravel. The monastery map itself is quite beautiful, and Zacharias is a compelling villain. I will admit that sneaking around is my least favorite part, but you do get to fight some people. At first, you don't have a weapon, so when you face off with 3 of Zachariah's men, it's just a straight up brawl, but eventually, you get a pretty awesome sword, and the fights become fun again. Easily the worst part of the DLC was actually a glitch. Apparently, if you played it before they dropped a patch, all of the items that you had on your wall of your forge disappeared. I didn't know that when I started it, so I lost a bunch of good swords, including Radzig's sword, which is extra sad, having just played the first game for the first time, and it being such a motivating factor for Henry's journey. Other than that glitch, I have to say that the DLC is a lot of fun, and well worth your time. I'm sad that this might be the end of my adventure with Henry, though there's always hardcore mode or just generally playing through the story again, which I'm sure I'll do eventually. All told, I've spent about 160 hours playing this game, which outside of sports games or like Call of Duty is the most that I've ever put into a video game. Kingdom Come Deliverance has changed the way that I look at games in general and opened up the door to lengthy RPGs. So those are my thoughts on Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Personally, this is my favorite game of the year, my personal game of the year. In fact, it's probably my favorite game that I've ever played. Hopefully I can find another game that impacts me in the same way, but it's really been my gateway into RPGs and kind of bigger games. Games I was always a little bit afraid to try because I wasn't sure if I wanted to commit the time to them, but Kingdom Come Deliverance got its hooks in me, and now I am a fan of Warhorse Studios for life. I can't wait to see what they do next. What game should I play next that's along the lines of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. We have new videos coming out every single week. And check out our other channels, which include Those Fake Nerds, where we cover nerd and pop culture news. We Good Sports, where we cover sports news. Better Radio, which is our podcasting channel. And our newest channel, We Get Scary, where we cover urban legends and cryptids. Again, really appreciate you checking out this video. It's probably long because it's a combination of all the other videos. But, I wanted to give you something to listen to over the holidays. So, anyways, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.